Hey guys, it's Faye, and today I'm sharing my build for Path of Exile 3.2 Bestiary. This league, I'm planning on playing Hierophant Crit Flame Totems. Flame Totems have held a very special place for me in Path of Exile, since the very first character I rolled in 2013 was a Flame Totems Templar. To celebrate the newly minted 3.2 Hierophant, I decided to go back to one of my most beloved skills in PoE this league. Gameplay footage is from the live server, so please keep in mind that the new patch changes aren't in effect. The gameplay will look very similar obviously, but this is my character from 2013, retired to standard at level 84 and is now a Hierophant. You will have a lot more DPS without the less damage penalty and better utility and survivability in patch 3.2. Hierophant received a major buff in 3.2. Gone are the days of less damage in return for extra totems in the Ascendancy tree. That alone would be a welcome change, but the tree also got one of the more major overhauls in 3.2, and totem nodes got some more utility and survivability. Pursuit of Faith now grants 100% increased totem duration and adds an additional totem with no penalty. Continuing down that line, Ritual of Awakening now has 50% increased totem placement speed, an additional totem with no penalty, and life and mana regen. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to the build. I'm going to go over what is required for the build first. I'm using this as a league starter myself, so my requirement is that I don't need much to get to endgame, and also that I have room to improve my gear. Since people have misunderstood that endgame options don't mean absolute requirements while leveling in an early endgame, I will be covering possible upgrades at the end of the guide. You don't need a 6-link off-color unique to play early endgame to fund another build. That's something you can aspire to later if you decide you're enjoying the build. Because of this, the only required unique is the Spire of Stone unique jewel. I expect these to get a bit more hype this league because of the Hierophant and Chieftain buffs. Even so, these aren't exceptionally rare in the drop table, and prices will fall very quickly to be at most 2 to 3C. This is a super important jewel in order to prevent your totems from being stunned, and is worth the loss of a DPS jewel slot. Your totems don't do any DPS while stunned. Any rare mace or wand with good spell or elemental damage with cast speed works while leveling and during early endgame. The build uses a shield, just any rare shield, with your basic stats like life, elemental resist, cast speed, and elemental damage. There are plenty of options while leveling, like ES shield bases with implicit spell damage and good armor ES shields for the stats we want. Since Hierophant already has 2 extra totems, and we're running Mind Over Matter, Tukahama's Fortress, not required, and that's a really good thing because it's going to be super expensive this league. If you want a super budget quality of life flask, you can go for an Atziri's Promise flask. People will be farming it at Atziri as soon as possible, and eventually these flasks will just be super cheap from sheer quantity. The Templar's Hierophant Ascendancy has received an amazing revamp in 3.2. I covered most of the changes for the nodes this build uses at the beginning of the video, but I'm going to go over the Ascendancy node order and how they interact with Flame Tome in particular, and I'm only going to mention what actually applies to the build. First, I plan on getting Pursuit of Fate. It provides an extra totem, 100% increased totem duration, 6% increased damage per enemy killed by your totems recently, meaning in the past 4 seconds, and 10% increased cast speed while you have a totem. Next, with my Cruel Lab points, I'll grab the Ritual of Awakening node. It provides another totem, bringing the total to 4, 50% totem placement speed, and a 0.5% mana regen per second per totem. Both your character and totems regenerate 1% of life per second per totem. The Totem line in the Ascendancy received an amazing buff and it really needed it. Now we get survivability even, and utility. If you can't tell from the gameplay footage, having less damage per totem really hurts. For my last 4 Ascendancy nodes, I decided to go for survivability. First, I went to Divine Guidance and Merciless for the 150 max mana and 10% of damage taken from mana before life. In Uber Lab, I will be picking up Sanctuary of Thought. Because this is a totem build, it's super mana heavy as it is, and it's a mind over matter build. This node got a buff as well, 10% less mana reservation of skills, so the 2 auras we do run don't really affect our mana pool. The passive tree is located in the description below with leveling trees. In general, I tried to focus on both DPS and survivability. You could adjust the tree either way if you want to have either more DPS or more life. There are so many nice options that notables like Snowforge just didn't make the cut for me since I wanted the extra life, but you could absolutely sacrifice life nodes and grab Snowforge instead. The keystones the build uses are the Ancestral Bond keystone and Mind Over Matter. Ancestral Bond provides us with our initial 2 totems, and Mind Over Matter is for survivability and it works really well with Hierophant. The Pantheon really isn't a big deal since you can swap them on the fly. I plan on using the Brine King to prevent stuns and Rislatha for Life Flask. You can swap as needed. If a map has Burning Ground, take the Pantheon power to negate that entirely, and so forth. Next, the gem setups for the build. Flame Totem will be linked to the following: Elemental Focus, Controlled Destruction, Increased Critical Strikes, Empower, and Fire Penetration. Empower will take some time to get, but ideally you want at least a level 3 Empower if you plan on pushing the build. Until you can get Empower, just shift Fire Pen to your 5th link. I plan on self-casting Scorching Ray in order to help out my Flame Totems, especially when fighting bosses. While the skill itself will deal no damage because of Ancestral Bond, you still get the benefit of Scorching Ray's amazing fire resistance debuff. It's linked to faster casting, Arcane Surge, and increased duration. Arcane Surge is a great support gem, and while the buff is active, it grants a more spell damage modifier, cast speed, and mana regen. Arcane Surge will proc whenever you spend a set amount of mana with the skill it's linked to. Keep in mind how much mana Scorching Ray spends and how many casts it has per second to see how high you can level and still reliably proc Arcane Surge. Faster casting and increased duration benefit both skills in this setup. Scorching Ray will accumulate stages more quickly, and stacks will fall off more slowly because of increased duration. Arcane Surge will have a higher mana threshold since faster casting will allow you to cast more Scorching Ray casts in a second, and the increased duration means the Arcane Surge buff will last longer. I'm using Orb of Storms to gain power charges and to curse for utility since I didn't pick up the Conviction of Power Ascendancy node. Link it to power charge on critical, curse on hit, and flammability. Your movement skill will be Lightning Orb. Link it to less duration and faster casting. Flame Dash is the better pick for the early game, and I plan on linking it to faster casting for leveling. If you like Flame Dash better, by all means, use it only and never switch to Lightning Orb. The build uses Clarity and the new Herald of Ash aura. Clarity helps the hefty mana cost of totems and greatly enhances the Mind Over Matter keystone with much quicker mana regen. The new Herald of Ash grants us more spellfire damage. Even though the build takes Mind Over Matter, Herald of Ash is such a minor reservation that it's worth it for the more multiplier. Since totems use your spell and fire damage, the buff also works with your totems. I tested out the numbers, and even with a perfect Clear Mind Jewel, the new Herald of Ash comes out on top. Because there's room here, I decided to use Enduring Cry, so the leveled up Immortal Call is worth it for survivability. Cast when damage taken is a very valuable setup in general. Most builds are just going to have one. This build should be able to handle a maxed out cast when damage taken gem setup just fine. Support with Immortal Call, summon Lightning Golem for the cast speed DPS increase, and lastly, increase duration so Immortal Call will last longer. You can absolutely substitute a Stone Golem instead of a Lightning Golem for some life regeneration and a slight DPS decrease. I plan on maxing cast when damage taken since I will also be using Enduring Cry, and I will want to level Immortal Call and my Golem. While leveling, you will get access to Flame Totem very early on in Act 1. I recommend supplementing it with a skill like Firestorm until level 28, when you'll take Ancestral Bond and be able to use 2 Flame Totems. Even if they're not listed as a quest reward, vendors in each act will have gems that were not offered. In Act 3, you'll gain access to all the gems you've unlocked so far by doing the Library Golden Page quest, so pick up any you're missing. Be sure to pick up those gems and level them as soon as possible, either on spare slots or on alternate weapon slots. Once you reach mapping, there's a couple map mods you're gonna probably want to avoid. Just don't do no regen maps. You're not gonna have any mana, you're not gonna have any life regen, and it's just not gonna work out. You can technically do elemental reflect maps, but Hierophant isn't chieftain, so expect your totems to destroy themselves super quick. This section covers if you want to push the build as far as you can using currency. Once again, these items are not required if you don't want to push the absolute limits of endgame. Some of these items are going to be major currency sinks, but goals if you decide to continue. The Wise Oak is a really good flask in pretty much any elemental build that uses hits. A well-rolled one will still go for a decent sum, especially early in the league. The other costly part of running this flask is that it requires your fire resistance to be the highest resist, so your totems will have additional fire pen, so you're probably going to have to buy some good gear and swap things around. The first moderately expensive item on this list are Voidbringer gloves. They provide a nice amount of crit and shouldn't be as expensive as some of the other items I'm going to mention. The mod where skills cost more mana isn't as damaging as, say, the Abyssus damage penalty, but try to keep it low since mind over matter is a thing. There's an amazing option for unique body armor, and that's the Infernal Mantle. It has amazing crit and synergy with fire skills. Infernal Mantles by themselves are dirt cheap. I couldn't get rid of some of mine priced in Alch in Abyss. You should be able to get a 5-link Infernal Mantle pretty easily and cheaply. The pricey Infernal Mantle for pushing endgame as far as you can is a 6-link Corrupted Infernal Mantle with the +1 to socketed gems corruption. Since Infernal Mantles are typically cheap, this means corrupting them and paying Varici's fees to get the mantle 6-socketed, coloring for 3 red sockets, and lastly, the super steep Varici 6-linking fee of over 1,000 fusings. You're also going to need a ton of Vol Orbs and a level 8 Varici or Varici service to do this. You should come out ahead by doing this yourself instead of buying one outright, since there isn't that much to chance besides getting your initial Infernal Mantle corruption. You don't need a 6-link Corrupted Infernal Mantle to play the build, but this is one way to go if you decide to stick with it and dump currency into it. A non-corrupted 5 or 6-link Infernal Mantle is just fine for mapping if you don't plan on taking the build further. Some more pricey options will be getting nice diamond rings with life, resist, and stats like cast speed. You're also going to want a nice crit amulet with good crit multi, life, and stats like cast speed and any attributes you need. There's also a great shaped amulet mod of elemental damage penetration. The absolute best in slot one-hander for this build will more than likely end up being a nice rare crit wand with a good amount of cast speed and spell damage. Doriani's Catalyst is an option as well until you can get that GG rare wand, but it's also very pricey. A good shield for this build could set you back in Exile or more. Try to get an armor ES base so it can roll stats like elemental damage and cast speed, in addition to life and resistance rolls. Overall, this build should be an excellent league starter and carry you to acquiring your initial league currency, which you can either put back into this build or fund an alternate character with. If you decide to pour your currency into this character, it should be able to handle endgame content decently and push you towards the Uber Elder fight. I have information about the build in the Google document below for easy reference, and also timestamps to each part of the guide in the description. If you have any questions about the build, feel free to ask. Do you have a particular Path of Exile build that's nostalgic for you or a standby? Flame Totems is that for me, so I'm just wondering if you guys have a skill like that. If this helped you out, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. It really helps out a lot, and I try to have a build video for the start of each new Path of Exile league. I'm so hyped to play Flame Totems again with these awesome Hierophant buffs. Thank you guys so much for watching, and good luck in Bestiary League, and until next time.